This conference will now be recorded.
A very good evening to one and all present here. I, Ms. Sneha Mahajan, Executive Organizer, on behalf of BioSetup Life Sciences, take this honor to welcome our Founder Coordinator, Argyadeep Das Sir, our Event Coordinators, Dr. Sudeep Das, Dr. Kavita Paul, Dr. Arpana Sharma, Dr. Ritu Chandel, Mrs. Somuji Bhargavi, and our today's eminent guest speaker, Dr. Shambhaji Chatterjee. Faculty members, organizers, and all my dear student participants, I welcome you all for the international webinar on telomerase as therapeutic target in cardiovascular diseases, organized by Biosetup Life Science in collaboration with Institute of Molecular and Transitional Therapeutic Strategies, Hanover Medical School, Germany. I hope you all are safe and doing good at your end. Before starting the session, a humble request to all the participants to please do not share your audio, video, or screen sharing in order to avoid any kind of disturbance. If you have any doubt during the session, please use the chat box. Filling of the feedback form is mandatory. Now let me tell you about BioSetup Life Sciences. BioSetup Life Sciences is a hub of scientific research and learning approved by ISO 9001:2015 certified organization and also MSME registered under Government of India. We have multidisciplinary team of eminent and experienced faculty members, research associates that provide support to the aspiring students in life sciences. We have successfully organized many webinars, workshops, internship programs, e-training programs, certification courses, career counseling, and competitive exam preparation, such as CSIR, IIT JAM, GATE B, IISc, DBT. We are continuously working for the career improvement of students. As we all are aware, we have been facing difficult times during the ongoing pandemic since 2 years, but we believe in not stopping and giving quality education to the budding minds through the online platform. You must have also heard that empty rakes makes more noise. So it's important to keep filling the bucket of knowledge through any source available. Keeping this in mind, now I would like to introduce our event coordinators, Dr. Sudeep Das, Dr. Kavita Paul, Dr. Arpana Sharma, Dr. Ritu Chandel, and Mrs. Somaji Bhargavi. About Dr. Kavita Paul, she is a scientist and currently working at Advanced Center for Treatment Research for Cancer, Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai, India. Dr. Ritu Chandel, she is MBBS, MD Biochemistry, Consultant Biochemistry, Bridge Candy Hospital Trust, India. Dr. Sudeep Das, he is PhD Infection Biologist, Microbiome Expert, Marie Curie European Postdoctoral Fellow, University of Lausanne, Switzerland. Mrs. Somaji Bhargavi, she is MSc PhD, lecturer in biotechnology and microbiology, GATE GSET qualified, and faculty member of BioSetup. Now I request Dr. Kavita Pal ma'am to introduce our today's guest speaker, Dr. Shambhaji Chatterjee ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Sneha. Hello, Dr. Chatterjee. Nice to meet you on this online platform. I purposely not starting my camera because there will be some issue with the connection. So yeah, it is my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Shambhaji Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee did her graduation in biotechnology from St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, followed by MSc in microbial gene technology from Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai. She was a merit student in both her graduation and post-graduation. She then completed her PhD from Hanover Medical School, Germany, and her topic of research was on role of telomerase in cardiac protection, aging, and regeneration. She also worked on understanding the role of long non-coding RNAs in treatment of heart diseases. At present, she is doing her postdoctoral research at the same institute and exploring more in the same field. She has done many conference presentations and received many awards. To name a few, she was awarded International Early Career Physiologist Travel Grant, and she also recently has been awarded with research grant from German Society of Cardiology for 1 year. Apart from these things, she has authored many publications, around 12 research articles and 4 review articles, and I hope many more are in pipelines. So on behalf of BioSetup, I wish you a good luck, Dr. Chatterjee, for your future endeavors. And now I request you to start with your today's talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kavita, for this kind introduction, and a very warm welcome from my side to all of you. I saw a lot of audience members have been writing in the chat, so a very warm welcome from my side as well. And as Dr. Kavita mentioned, that for today's topic, I will be discussing telomerase. One second, I'm just, so I will, can you see my screen, by the way, before I start?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, for today's topic, then I would be discussing this protein, which is known as telomerase, and especially in the context of cardiovascular diseases. And my idea would be to first go through some basic textbook knowledge, and then to gradually build it up towards the research work that we have been doing in our lab. And this is like more or less the work that we did in the last 4 or 5 years or so. So I would first give a brief overview of telomerase and telomere biology, and then to give a short glimpse into what are the effects of telomerase that are already known for cardioprotection. And then I will like really dig deep into the study that we published recently, and which is the main topic of my today's talk. So I'm assuming that most of you have heard about DNA and chromosomes. So in terms of eukaryotic or linear chromosomes, what we have is, for example, here what you see is some blue stuff and some yellow dots that look like stars. So the blue stuff is basically the chromosome, and these yellow dots that you see on the ends are basically the telomeric structures. So the question arises is, what is telomere and why do we need it for? So the first thing is, in terms of the chromosome structure itself, in a eukaryotic linear chromosome, you would have a centromere, then a short arm and a long arm of the chromosome, and both these arms will be protected by telomeric structures at ends. If you now zoom into the structure of the telomere, what you will basically see is a complex of proteins, which for the sake of simplicity, I'm just giving the name of the whole complex, which is known as Shelton complex. It's made up of 6 different proteins. And along with this DNA sequence, which is TTAGG. So basically these are hexameric, so that means 6 base pairs. And it's basically these 6 base pairs that are repeated again and again and again and again, along with these Shelton complexes, which together form what is known as the telomere structure. And the role of this structure is to protect the ends of the chromosome. And the question would be, why do we need this protection? And for this, again, we go to a very basic concept from cell cycle division and from DNA replication. So as you all know, that for a cell to divide, it has to be in the cell cycle. And the cell cycle is broadly divided into 4 major phases. So the G1 phase, the S phase, the G2 phase, and the M phase, which is the mitotic phase, where the cell basically divides into 2 after cytokinesis, and then you will have 2 daughter cells arising from the parent cell. And in this, there is one specific step that happens during the S phase, which is the DNA replication, where basically the chromosome is duplicated so that it can provide both copies to its daughter cells. And in the process of DNA replication, what would happen is, just briefly describing so that everyone is able to follow through, the DNA strands will open up with the help of helicase, and then what you have here is the origin of replication and a replication fork. And then one of the strands, which is the leading strand, would be able to continuously synthesize the DNA in the direction of the replication fork. Whereas the other one will always need to have primers, and then it will make a stretch of the DNA. And then again another primer, and again it replicates a certain stretch of the DNA. These small fragments are known as the Okazaki fragments, and this strand is known as the lagging strand. So eventually, when the DNA sorry, there is a message in the group. Someone says that my screen is not visible. Is it the case?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
visible. Yes.
Okay. So then, yeah, I will go ahead then. So then in that case, this lagging strand, after it finishes the replication, what you would end up with is something like this. So the leading strand has one primer and then a continuous stretch of the replicated daughter strand. And for the lagging strand, there will be several such stretches. Finally, then the primers will be removed and the Okazaki fragments will be joined together. But then, if you think about it, there will always be one part of the DNA in the daughter strand that will remain unreplicated. So basically, this part which had the primer here and this part which had the primer here. And therefore, these are known as 3' overhangs. And this means that every time the cell would divide, it will always have one part from the 3' end that will not get replicated into the daughter strand, meaning you will lose the ends of the chromosome. So, and if that was the case, then it would be a big problem for our cells, because then we would lose all the important genes and stuff like this, which are necessary for the cell to survive and to proliferate and to perform all its functions. So the nature devised a very special enzyme and a fascinating enzyme, which is known as telomerase. And this is basically an RNA-dependent DNA polymerase. And this is the enzyme that basically is responsible or basically maintains or synthesizes these telomeric structures. So the way it is able to do so is with the help of two major subunits. So one is shown here in yellow, which is called TERT, telomerase reverse transcriptase. This is the protein subunit of the whole enzyme. And it is supported by this TERC, which is the telomerase RNA component, which basically provides the RNA template. So as the name suggests, it is an RNA-dependent DNA polymerase. It will use the TERC, which provides the RNA template. And based on this, it will synthesize this TTAGG, which are basically the telomeric repeats. And this process of adding these telomeric repeats requires the process of cell division. So only when the cell is dividing during DNA replication, the telomerase will be able to work and add these telomeric repeats. So in general, in terms of development, all our chromosomes get these several thousand telomeric repeats, so like TTAGG, TTAGG, so on and so forth, into all our chromosomes during the blastocyst stage. And therefore, if you have to imagine this, a cell that has telomerase activity in it, with every round of cell cycle division, no matter how many times it will divide and proliferate, it will be able to maintain its telomeric structures. Whereas a cell which loses its telomerase activity with every round of cell cycle division will gradually lose a bit by bit its telomeric repeats. And therefore, there will be a certain time when the cell has such short telomeres that it cannot divide anymore. And this is what is known as senescence or aging. So another important fact to remember is that this enzyme is silenced after birth in most of our cells. Except for the stem cells, germ cells, and a few progenitor cells, most of the other cell types in our body do not express telomerase anymore. Therefore, we have the problem of aging. So if you now imagine these concepts together and put them together in the context, so from a child to an adult, it will keep on dividing its cells throughout its lifespan. The more the cells divide, the shorter the telomeres will become because it does not have telomerase activity anymore, and therefore the regenerative potential of the cell decreases. And that is why we see that with our age, so as the age increases, the telomere lengths decrease, and this leads to many other aging associated diseases, of which cardiac or cardiovascular disorders are a prominent one. And so therefore the question would be, okay, so now I have telomerase when I'm young, or let's say in the blastocyst stage, then it stops its activity once I'm born, and then I keep losing telomeres. So what if I would reactivate the telomerase? Will it help me? Will it help me to have a better life? So there have been several studies which look at reactivation of telomerase and how it is protected. For the sake of today's talk, I'm only going to discuss a few publications that discuss the role of telomerase reactivation in cardiomyocytes. So what other researchers have already done is that they use the TERT subunit, and then they saw that if you reactivate the telomerase, then it is able to protect the cardiomyocytes from cell death, so apoptosis. So what you see here is TERT, and what you see here is like the mutant TERT or the vector, which has no sequence for TERT. And trypan blue is a dye that can be used to measure cell death. So they did a simple experiment, they reactivated TERT, and then they saw that when you have reactivation of TERT under stress conditions, these cardiomyocytes are able to survive much better than the cells that do not have telomerase expression. Then there was another paper from Dr. Chris Sandberg, who's also my group leader and under whose supervision I started my PhD. And when he was doing in his postdoc time in the lab of Professor Maria Blasco, he did an amazing study where he did the telomerase therapy in the mice model of myocardial infarction. So myocardial infarction is, to simplify it, it's like doing a heart attack for a mice. So you basically have different arteries in the mice and then you ligate them, and then this sort of recapitulates a defective or a dysfunctioning heart. And what they saw here is, for example, sham would mean, so what you see here in red, sham would mean a mice that has not had any surgery. So they are able to survive quite well. What you see here in black is a mice that received this myocardial infarction surgery, and therefore the survival has reduced significantly. And now, if you had some mice which received the telomerase therapy, which you see here in blue, even if you do a myocardial infarction surgery on them, they are able to survive much better, meaning that telomerase therapy is cardioprotective for the heart. Following this, there was another study by Professor Andreas Baer, who has now his lab in Wisconsin, and they studied the role of telomerase therapy for endothelial cells. So now remember, the heart is made up of different cell types, majorly cardiomyocytes, fibroblasts, and endothelial cells. And what they studied was how the TERT in the endothelial cells is able to travel into the mitochondria and then protect the endothelial cells from the reactive oxygen species. So reactive oxygen species are basically superoxide molecules that are normally produced in the cell, and we don't want to have super high levels of ROS. So anything that's too high, if it gets much higher than the normal basal level, it's detrimental to the cell function and especially to the mitochondrial function. So with all of these things in mind, we wanted to figure out, so what is the molecular mechanism for this telomerase mediated protection, and specifically for cardiomyocytes? And to do this, as I mentioned, so the role of telomerase would be to add telomeric repeats. And to add telomeric repeats, you would need the cells to divide. However, the adult cardiomyocytes are terminally differentiated cells. That means they do not divide anymore. So then the question would arise that, okay, if the cells are not dividing and if this telomerase needs the cells to be dividing, how else can it possibly protect the cardiomyocytes or protect the heart function? And with this, we had this clue from the work from Dr. Andreas Baer, where he showed that in the endothelial cells, the telomerase is able to travel into the mitochondria and protect from the reactive oxygen species. And from this, we had this idea that this would be really relevant for cardiomyocytes, because as we all know, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and it is the thing that you need to generate ATP. And cardiomyocytes are a cell type that are constantly contracting and relaxing, which is why your heart is able to pump blood throughout the day, every single minute. So 24/7, your heart is working, cardiomyocytes are contracting and relaxing. So imagine the number of ATP molecules that it needs to be able to do its function. And of course, adult cardiomyocytes are super rich in mitochondria, and almost 30 to 40% of the adult cardiomyocyte is made up of mitochondria. So therefore, it would make sense that most probably the telomerase is somehow doing something in the mitochondria of the cardiomyocytes and thereby protecting them from apoptosis and cell death. And with this in mind, we now had to think of a model where we could study mitochondria in cardiomyocytes and have the role of telomerase. And while looking into the literature and digging more into this, we came up with the idea of looking into the cardio-oncology aspect of it. So cardio-oncology is basically a combination of two words. So cardio is cardiovascular stuff, and oncology comes from cancer. And this is a new emerging field of research where people are looking at the negative effects of cancer treatment in the cardiovascular system. And we chose to use this method to look more in detail about what telomerase is doing and how is it really able to protect the cardiomyocytes. So the next, I would in general say that, okay, since 2019, we all know that COVID has really globally created havoc in terms of health concerns. And in 2020, based on the data that even still heart diseases were the #1 killer of population in the US. But even before COVID happened, and I'm sure the numbers will change now, but even before COVID happened, it was always the cardiovascular diseases and the cancer that were the #1 killer for people across the globe. And therefore, this is important to know that these are two major burdens in healthcare system, no matter which country you look at. And if we now look specifically into cancer, there are very different types of cancers, and breast cancer is one of the most prevalent types of cancer that is out there. And for this, there have been several improvements in cancer therapy and in surgeries, and how the cancer is diagnosed and how the patients are treated. And with all the effort from the entire scientific community, from the clinicians and from the researchers all over the world, there has been a significant increase in the number of cancer survivors over the last few years. So for example, as you see here from prostate cancer, earlier it used to be like 67% of the patients would survive. Now it has gone up to 98% or so. For example, if we say leukemia, earlier it used to be only about 34% of the patients who would survive. Now it's about 60%. So all in all, what we see is that the number of patients who recover from cancer are increasing, and this is a very good thing. However, recent study has shown that most of these patients who recover from cancer end up with chronic heart failure symptoms. So in most of the cases, when the patient comes to the clinic, especially in case of breast cancer, in case of leukemia, in case of gut cancers, gut-related cancers, they are given with chemotherapy or radiotherapy. And in chemotherapy, the most commonly used drug is what you see here is known as doxorubicin. There are other ones that are called epirubicin. There are a combination of other drugs. But doxorubicin is more or less the most potent drug, chemotherapeutic drug that is out there. And what people saw was that depending on the dose of the drug that you give, there is, so CHF would mean chronic heart failure. So there is a percentage of, or there is a probability of the patient getting heart failure symptoms eventually. So on one hand, the patient is recovering from cancer, but on the other hand, he or she might end up with a cardiovascular syndrome. And if you look further and divide this in terms of age groups, so what you see here is, let's say in triangle, what you see is the age of 15 to 39. And what you see here in this plain line is the age above 60. So what you can clearly see here that depending on the age of the patient who's receiving the chemotherapy, the chances of the patient to develop or end up with heart failure or different cardiovascular symptoms is significantly increased. So this is just to highlight the importance and the fact that we really need to be concerned about how we can best treat the patients to recover from cancer and then to lead a healthy life further on, and not to get stuck up with other problems in their health. So we then focused on doxorubicin, which is also known as adriamycin, and this is an anthracycline class of drugs. And the way it acts is that it is supposed to, or it is known to intercalate into the DNA, and it also blocks the topoisomerase 2B. And this also, along with this fact, increases the levels of ROS in the mitochondria of the cell. So thereby, as I mentioned before, we needed a model where we had mitochondria, cardiomyocytes, and we could do a telomerase therapy. So this seems to be a very good model for us because we really wanted to look at what would happen if the telomerase is really affecting something in the mitochondria. So we then moved forward with this idea, and the idea was that if you have therapeutic drug, on one hand it's killing tumors, on the other hand it's cardiotoxic for the cell. And we wanted to reactivate the telomerase and then see if it can protect the heart and give a better cardiac function. And with this in mind, we started off with a chronic model of doxorubicin-induced cardiotoxicity in the mice. So basically, the mice at the age of 12 weeks received a telomerase therapy. So it was an AAV9-based telomerase therapy. And then after 1 week, we gave them cumulative doses of doxorubicin. So every time they got 5 milligrams per kg of the body weight. And this is also something that happens in the clinic. So when a patient comes, if they get chemotherapy, it's a cumulative dose, and they get it normally 4 to 5 times. And then after 1 week, we would sacrifice the animals, and then we would check for different phenotypes. So, for example, if the doxorubicin would have worked as a chemotherapeutic agent, it is known to kill the cells. So what you see here basically is a reduction in the body weight. So in white are the animals that did not receive any kind of treatment. So these are healthy ones. In black, what you see is a mice that received the AAV9 therapy, but this AAV9 did not have any telomerase. And in gray, what you see is the mice that received the AAV9 telomerase therapy and the doxorubicin. So what you see here is that in black, there is a significant decrease in the body weight, which is sort of in a trend of being rescued in the telomerase therapeutic group. Now, if we specifically look at the heart rate to TBL length, so the heart rate drops down drastically when you have doxorubicin toxicity. And this is quite well protected in the group of mice that received the telomerase therapy. Then we measured the tunnel positive cells. So tunnel positive cells would mean the cells that are undergoing cell death. So as you see here that with doxorubicin, there is a significant increase in cell death as we would expect. And this cell death was protected in the group that received the telomerase therapy. Further on, there is another very significant phenotype of doxorubicin. So when you have doxorubicin cardiotoxicity, the cells basically shrink, they become smaller in size. This is called atrophy. And what you see here is compared to a sham animal, that means an animal which did not receive any treatment whatsoever, the cells look quite normal. When you have the cells with doxorubicin stress, they look quite thin and squeezed up. And then you have the animals that receive the telomerase therapy. So this is a representative image from one of the groups, from one of the animals from each group. And when we quantified, we again saw the same trend. So in terms of doxorubicin, in the control group, they were significantly smaller in size, the cardiomyocytes. And then in the telomerase therapy group, the cell size was protected or rescued. So with this, we then moved on that, okay, this model system seems to have worked. We see the effects of doxorubicin at the cell level, at the cell phenotype level. So what happens in the cardiac function? So basically for this, what we did was echocardiography. So maybe you might not know what echocardiography is. So to explain it in a simpler way, it's like doing an ultrasound for your heart. So we basically measure the contraction or the function of the heart and how the ventricles are pumping blood in and out of the heart. And what you see here are different parameters that you can measure from echocardiography. So LV means left ventricular and PW is posterior wall. And the D means diastole. And the S here means a systole. So the heart has, the pumping of the heart has a systole and a diastole. And so we measured the thickness of the heart the left ventricular of the heart at diastole and systole. And in both cases, we saw that there is a decrease in the posterior wall thickness of the left ventricular after the doxorubicin, which is protected by the telomerase therapy. And then we went on to measure other functions, for example, DPDT, which is the overall contractility of the whole heart. And then here also we see that there is a significant rescue in the telomerase group, as shown here in gray, compared to the control group, which did not have the telomerase therapy or the telomerase reactivation. So now we also see that, okay, the telomerase is able to protect the heart function. So how is it doing it? Just to make sure that it is not based on the telomere length, extension, or elongation, we performed a technique which is called as QFISH, so quantitative fluorescence in situ hybridization. What you do here basically is you have your cells or your tissue, and then you would stain it with a dye. In this case, it's a Cy3 labeled telomere specific PNA probe. That means this dye would go and bind specifically to the telomeric regions of your sample. So let's say your sample has really long telomeres, then many of these probes will go and bind to it. And therefore, you will have a very strong, bright Cy3 signal. And imagine if your cells have really short telomeres, maybe 5 or 6 repeats, then there will be very few of these probes that will go and bind to it. Hence, you will see a very light or a faint Cy3 signal. But when we analyzed the tissue from these different animals, whether it was the sham group, the control group, or the telomerase therapy group, we did not see any major differences in the signal of the Cy3, meaning that all these groups had more or less the same length of telomeres. That means that the telomerase therapy is not extending the telomere length. So whatever protective effects we are seeing in this study is not based on the canonical or the conventional role of telomerase. And therefore, as we had imagined, we wanted to really look deep into the mitochondria structure and what's happening there. So just to have an overview of the tissue itself, we performed electron microscopy. So what you see here is a sham animal, that means no treatment, nothing. And what you see here are these, I don't know if you can see it so clearly in your screens, but you see some like parallel lines. So you have these lines that are like big blocks and circles. These are your mitochondria. So these are the mitochondria in the cardiomyocytes of this mice. And then followed by these parallel lines of mitochondria, you see sarcomere structures here. Then again, a line of mitochondria and again a sarcomeric structure. What you see here is the animal that received doxorubicin and did not have any therapeutic dose. And for example, what you can see the difference, I hope, from this one to this one is that the mitochondrial structures are quite small, like smaller in size, and they're like much more randomly organized compared to the control group. And we also saw that there were some stretches of the sarcomere which were not aligned parallelly. So there were like some breaks here and there that you could see that the sarcomeric structure itself or the organization was also damaged a bit. However, in the telomerase therapy group, the sarcomere structure looked quite good, but there was a significant or a striking observation that the mitochondria did not look too small, but they sort of looked like fused to each other, like big blobs stuck to each other. And therefore, we wanted to see what is happening here. And one very important protein that is known to be involved in mitochondria physiology is the phospho-DRP1. So the DRP protein is, the phospho-DRP protein is upregulated whenever the mitochondria is undergoing fission. So mitochondria has two aspects that are always kept in balance. So one is fission, when the mitochondria breaks down into smaller mitochondria structures, and fusion, like for example, what you see here is the mitochondria will fuse to each other. And phospho-DRP1 is known to be upregulated when mitochondria is undergoing fission. And doxorubicin is a chemotherapeutic agent which is known to induce mitochondrial fission. So therefore, we checked for the levels of phospho-DRP1, and what you see here is that in the control doxorubicin group, the levels of phospho-DRP1 are quite upregulated, which is then again downregulated in the telomerase therapy group, which has been quantified here. meaning that the telomerase therapy was able to protect from the fission effect of the doxorubicin. So with all of this in mind, we really wanted to now look closely into what's happening to the mitochondria and what is happening when we overexpress telomerase. And in order to avoid using more animals and sacrificing them for the study, we then switched to a translational model. And for this, we really wanted to have as close as possible to the human setting. I mean, you cannot get human cardiomyocytes from healthy people to do these kind of studies, so that's ethically not possible. So the most popular way of doing it in the research field nowadays is to use human-induced pluripotent stem cells. So you basically use human-induced pluripotent stem cells, you differentiate them into cardiomyocytes, and then you perform different genetic therapeutics or genetic modulations and therapeutic strategies to investigate the molecular mechanisms. And this is what we also did. So in our case, what you see here is basically human iPSCs, let's say, and for any one of you who has not heard about iPSCs, so they are basically stem cell-like cells, and they have the potential to differentiate into all the three germ layers. So basically from these stem cells, I should be able to make a mesoderm, an endoderm, or an ectoderm cell type. For the process of differentiating iPSCs into cardiomyocytes, we followed a directed differentiation protocol. That means we modulated specifically the Wnt signaling pathway. And for this, we activated the Wnt signaling in the first 2 days of the differentiation by using a molecule called CHEER. And then we inhibited the Wnt pathway by using a molecule called IVP2. And then with subsequent medium changes, by day 8 or so, you can really start to see the cells beating or contracting, let's say. By day 15 or so, the contraction of the cells is quite good. And then you can further collect the cells, seed them, purify them, and perform your experiments. So for the sake of this study, we really waited till 2 months to perform our studies. And just to give you a brief glimpse of how the cells look like, I hope you all can see the video. So these are the cells at day 15 of the differentiation. And this is how in the cell culture dish, you can really see the cells beating and moving, and it's like they're dancing together. It's really fascinating to see it always. Like, it's an amazing experience. So with this in mind, now we wanted to first establish this model and to really see if we can use it as a system. So if now the iPS cells really differentiated into cardiomyocytes, we should see decrease in the expression of pluripotency markers. So the markers that are supposed to be upregulated at this stage should get downregulated here. And for example, here we looked at NANOG expression, and therefore at day 0, when the cells are still pluripotent stem cells, they are they're expressing NANOG at high levels, and therefore after the differentiation has occurred, the expression really goes down. And simultaneously, the expression of cardiomyocyte lineage markers, for example, NKX 2.5, should increase during the differentiation. And this is what we see here, that during the differentiation protocol, the pluripotency markers go down, the cardiomyocyte markers go up, basically establishing our system. And before then, if we want to really use this system to perform telomerase modulation or to perform gene therapy with telomerase, we also have to make sure what is the level of telomerase in these cells. How does it change? Does it remain the same? And so to do this, we again collected cells at different time points, and then we looked at the telomerase expression. And just like as I mentioned in the beginning, that for humans, after birth, the telomerase is shut down. What we also saw here was that after differentiation, compared to the pluripotent state, where it's stem cell and therefore high levels of telomerase, it's really shut down when you differentiate them into cardiomyocytes. So this was at the mRNA level with a qPCR-based method. So what happens, or can it be that there is really a teeny amount of telomerase activity or telomere protein that is still left in the cardiomyocytes? So to figure out this, we performed what is known as the telomere repeat amplification protocol. So don't get scared. I know it looks a bit confusing here, but just let me walk you through this. what you basically do here is you take the cell lysate, and if your cell lysate has telomerase activity, when you give it a substrate, it should be able to add these 6 base pair, 6 base pair, 6 base pair telomeric repeats. So, for example, and if the telomerase activity is too strong, you can also use a diluted cell lysate. So that's what we did here. So we have an undiluted cell lysate, which is always written as 1, and a 1 in 10 diluted cell lysate, which is written as 1 in 10. And then there is something called as delta here, which is basically the cell lysate was heat inactivated. So even if there was a telomerase protein, it will get degraded because we heated it up at 85 degrees. And what I hope you can clearly see here is that given the substrate, a cell at day 0, which is basically the iPS cell, still the iPS cell, has high levels of telomerase activity, which we can see in the form of a trap ladder, where every band, sorry, I will go back to the laser, where every band is basically 6 base pairs larger than the previous one. And that's why you get a trap ladder. So the higher the telomerase activity, the stronger the telomerase activity, the longer will be the ladder, and the stronger will be the band. So it will be more intense bands. And I hope that now you are able to understand that if from day 0, I move to day 3 or day 6 or day 10 of the differentiation, we start to see a very significant and stark decrease in the telomerase activity, which is shown here by the ladder, the strength and the length of the ladders. And therefore, we could conclude that really, if you wait till day 60 of the differentiation, so starting from day 0, if you wait till day 60, the cells really do not have any telomerase activity left in them. With which we could then conclude that yes, telomerase is silenced in the human iPS-derived cardiomyocytes, and this is a good translational model where we can now reactivate the telomerase at this day 60 time point and then see what is happening in the mitochondria when we treat the cells with doxorubicin. So now what we did was we took day 60 cells and then we again did the same thing. We now have AV6 with telomerase and an AV6 control which does not have any transgene being expressed. We transduced the human iPS cardiomyocytes and then we performed a trap assay, again the telomere repeat amplification protocol at day 70. And what we could clearly show is we used human iPSCs as a positive control, so strong trap ladder and strong activity. In the control cells which do not have any telomerase therapy, there is nothing. And the cells that receive the AV6 start here, you can again see a reappearance of the trap ladder, meaning that the cells now have the expression and the activity of telomerase. And using this system now and using this setup, now what we did was at day 68, we started to add the doxorubicin for 48 hours. So just to give you a brief idea, what you saw in the mouse data or in the in vivo study, there we treated the mouse with 5 milligrams per kg of doxorubicin for 5 weeks. So it was like a cumulative chronic effect of doxorubicin. What we did now in the human iPS cardiomyocyte model was more of an acute doxorubicin stress. And then what we did again was to measure the cell death. So if the doxorubicin is affecting the cardiomyocytes, we should see a higher level of cell death. And this we measured using the caspase levels. So caspase are a set of proteins. There are many different types of caspase. So they are upregulated when the cell is undergoing cell death. And what we saw here was that if you have a cell that has not been treated with any virus and compared to the telomerase treated or transduced virus, there is not much change happening in terms of caspase activity. But once you add the doxorubicin to these cells, the caspase levels really shoot up, which is then again quite well rescued in the telomerase therapy group. So the cardiomyocytes, the human iPS cardiomyocytes that received the telomerase virus and were able to express it, were protected from the cell death caused by doxorubicin. And then we moved on to really isolate the mitochondria from these cardiomyocytes. So from all of these different groups, we isolated the mitochondria with and without the doxorubicin treatment. And what we saw is that in the normal basal condition, when we overexpress or reactivate telomerase, there is certain amount of telomerase protein a TERT protein, that subunit, TERT subunit, is going into the mitochondria. However, when you have the cells under doxorubicin stress, the amount of TERT translocating into the mitochondria is significantly higher, which we could also quantify. And so therefore, with all of this, we were really sure that when the cells is under stress with doxorubicin, the TERT protein is definitely going into the mitochondria to help it in some way. So the next step, what we did was we wanted to look at the mitochondrial structure itself. So remember in the in vivo data, I showed you these electron microscopy figures where the mitochondria looked quite small and it was undergoing fission. So what you see here is basically the cells that are stained with a dye which is called mitotracker green. So basically it goes, so it's a live cell staining. So you need live cardiomyocytes and you stain them with mitotracker. And whenever you have mitochondria, this will go and bind to it. And I hope you can really see clearly here that compared to the control and the telomerase therapy group in the untreated condition, when you have doxorubicin treatment, there is a significant decrease in the number of cells or the number of mitotracker green areas in the cell. And this is again rescued in the telomerase group. And this is what we also quantified. So basically, we wanted to see the distribution and the arrangement of mitochondria, which was really hampered in terms of in the context of doxorubicin stress, and then which was rescued by the telomerase therapy. Another method that we used was amplex red, which is basically to measure the levels of ROS in the cells. And as expected, after doxorubicin, the ROS levels were increased, which was then rescued by the telomerase therapy. And now with all of this, we now wanted to see that, okay, if the mitochondria is able to protect itself from the fission effects or from breaking down or from undergoing dysfunction, does it mean that reactivating telomerase is going to help the mitochondria to improve its function, specifically in the context of doxorubicin stress? And to do this, we then used the mitostress test, which is coming from the Seahorse assay system. And just to give you a brief idea of how this is done, you basically have these special plates from the Seahorse system, and you have to seed your cells on them. And then there are special cartridges which have these sensors that can detect basically the oxygen and the proton changes. And on the day of the assay, you basically then need to prepare some fresh medium and you need specific drugs. And these drugs, basically oligomycin, FCCP, and rotenone antimycin A, are targeted towards different parts of the mitochondrial electron transport chain. And with this, you basically stress the cells with these different drugs. And then depending on their response to these drugs, you can basically analyze the function of mitochondria. So to give you a bit more idea of how the data would look like. So OCR would mean oxygen consumption rate. And what you measure here in the first three time points are the basal readings. So what is the amount of oxygen that the cell is using up at the basal level? And what you see here is the control and the H-TERT in the black and the red. And in the basal conditions, they are pretty much at the same level. So they are using up the same amount of oxygen, meaning the mitochondria is working at more or less the same level. Now, when you have doxorubicin stress, so which is with the therapy, it's in green, and the control is in purple here. So when you have doxorubicin stress, the oxygen consumption really drops down, meaning that the mitochondria is not functioning or is not able to actively utilize oxygen anymore, which is then actually rescued at the H-TERT therapy, even at the basal level. Then we treat it with oligomycin. Oligomycin is a drug that will inhibit the ATPase synthase complex. So in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, there are 4 different complexes, complex 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the 5th one is basically the ATP pump, which generates the ADP into ATP. And oligomycin would then basically inhibit the ATP production. And then what you see is a significant drop. So if the ATP production is stopped, the mitochondria does not need oxygen anymore because it's not making any more ATP. So that's what you see here, a sharp decline overall. And here also you see that the control DOXO group is the most seriously affected one. Then we treat it with FCCP, which is a drug which affects the complex 2 and 3, and it basically disrupts the proton pump or the proton gradient in the mitochondria. And this forces the mitochondria to respire or to consume oxygen at the maximum level possible. And what you see here is that in the basal conditions, the cells are respiring quite well. But in the doxorubicin conditions, the respiration, the maximum respiration of the cell is a bit reduced, but still it's the most affected in the doxorubicin group. The telomerase therapy group is a little bit better. And finally, the rotenone and antimycin A is basically destroying the entire electron transport chain. So whatever oxygen is being consumed is now based on the non-mitochondrial oxygen or non-mitochondrial respiration. So I know this is too much of information, but the main message here is that we wanted to see how or if there is a change in the mitochondrial function. And for this, at the basal respiration itself, we could see that there is a strong decrease in the doxorubicin group, which is protected in the telomerase therapy group. And the main function of mitochondria, which is production of ATP, is also showing us a rescue. So the ATP production goes significantly down when you have doxorubicin, which is then protected in the telomerase therapy group. And with this, we could then really conclude that when we have telomerase therapy in the cardiomyocyte, they are able to translocate into the mitochondria and then protect the mitochondria by helping to maintain its function. And to summarize, with our study, we could show that in a healthy cardiomyocytes, you have a certain basal level of reactive oxygen species and a certain density of mitochondria. When you have doxorubicin-mediated cytotoxic effects, the mitochondria gets fragmented into much smaller size, meaning it's undergoing fission, and the number of ROS molecules or ROS species increase significantly. However, if you have a telomerase therapy, you can protect the cardiomyocytes by reducing the levels of ROS, and the telomerase would also enter into the mitochondria and help the mitochondria by modulating or by maintaining its function. And with all of this, we were able to really to shed a new light into what could be the molecular mechanism of telomerase in a cell that does not divide. So it is a proof of non-telomeric functions of telomerase in the mitochondria, which we could study in this research work. And with this, I would like to acknowledge all the people who have contributed significantly. Of course, the director of our institute, Professor Thum, and my group leader, Dr. Kristan Baer, without whose support and guidance, this would not have been possible. There were several members in the lab who contributed a lot and who helped me a lot, all of who have been mentioned here. We had also very nice collaborators with us. So I learned all this IPS and cardiomyocyte differentiation technique in the lab of Dr. Katrin, who is now a professor at University of Würzburg. We also had a lot of good samples from Dr. Robert Zweigert and Emiliano, and they provided us with embryonic stem cells and then differentiated them into cardiomyocytes, which I did not show here, but basically they also show the same trends in the telomerase expression. And Dr. Christina Brandenberger, who helped me a lot with doing all the electron microscopy stuff, which I showed here today. And we had also a collaborator from CNIO in Madrid, who helped us with the measurements of telomere lengths in the in vivo. And at the end, of course, all the funding agencies, so the MHH, HBRS for having me as a PhD student, for the Rebirth Cluster for funding my first few months as a PhD student, and DFG and ERC for all the funding that went into this project. And thank you all for your attention as well. And now it's time for questions. So I would be happy to answer if there are some questions. I think there were some in the chat, so I would go back and don't know where I. So Upendra asked, DNA binding proteins are protecting DNA. What about telomerase protection? Any kind of protein cap will help to make DNA guard instead of telomerase. Okay, so thank you for the question, Upendra. This is, I would actually go back to the slides. So this is always very important to remember that the telomerase is the enzyme that is making the telomeric structures. So what we have at the ends of the DNA is only the telomere structures. The telomerase protein, however, is not present at the end of the DNA. The telomere protein is the telomeric sequences are along with these sheltering complexes, and these complexes, which include TIN1, TIN2, POT1, POT2, RAP1. So these are different proteins that are involved, and they, along with the telomeric sequences, this TTAGG, are basically capping the ends of the telomere. So I guess this is what you mean by the DNA binding proteins that are protecting DNA. So they are already present in the end of the chromosome. What are the telomerase functions can be different species to species? So yeah, thank you again, Upendra, for this question. So the telomerase canonical function, what it is known to do is it has always been studied in terms of extending or elongating telomere structures. There are several other papers which talk about the role of telomerase, or the, let's say, as I said, that the telomerase has two parts. It has the protein and the RNA part. So here what you see is the protein part in yellow and the RNA part. Now there are several research groups who are looking at specifically the function of TERT, or specifically if there is any other function of the TERT. And TERT subunit, the protein subunit, has been shown to interact with many other signaling pathways to modulate different functions in the cell. For example, it has been known to interact with the Wnt signaling. It has been known to interact with EGFR signaling. So yeah, there can be different functions of the TERT, but the canonical function, which is to extend telomere length, is the same. But the other non-canonical functions are something that are being extensively investigated at the moment. I hope that answers your question. I would go to the next one. So again, there is another question from you, Upendra. Can you comment on the shorter telomerase versus shorter lifespan in different species? I mean, rats are okay. I mean, rats are lives are shorter than dogs as they have shortage of telomerase length. So that's a very good question, Upendra. So there are two things which we have to keep in mind. One, the mouse and the rat. So mouse in general has really long telomeric ends. So compared to the human, the mice will have much longer telomere ends. So what aging phenotype we see in humans at the age of 60 might and does take at least 3 or 4 generations in mice to see the same effect. It's just because they start off with really long telomeres, so they can proliferate for much longer time. And secondly, there has been a recent paper in PNAS from the lab of Professor Maria Blasco, where they actually looked at and they investigated that it's not about how much, so it is of course about how much long the telomeres are, but it is also about how fast the telomeres get shortened with every round of cell cycle division. So an animal or an organism where the shortening of telomeres is faster would end up showing aging or would end up having senescence faster than the other cells. So if you want, then I would highly recommend you to read that paper from Maria Blasco's lab. And there is a question from Gayatri, how AV6 TERT reactivates telomerase. So yeah, that's also a good question. So what we do is we use, so I did not have enough time to explain that. AV is an adeno-associated virus. And the idea is that we provide this, the mRNA sequence, the cDNA sequence of the TERT subunit to this. And once this AV infects or transduces the target cell, in our case, the cardiomyocytes, it will express the telomerase cDNA that we provided in the AV. So if I can go back. sorry, it will take a few seconds. Yeah, okay. So for example, what I have here in the schematic. So we have an AV, so AV9 in this case, because AV9 virus serotype is known to infect the or has higher tropism in vivo towards cardomyocyte. And then we have a CTNT promoter, which is cardomyocyte troponin T. That means this telomerase will be specifically overexpressed in the cardiomyocyte cells because it is under the expression of a cardiomyocyte specific promoter. And that's how we provide the TERT cDNA sequence, and then it's expressed in the cardiomyocyte cells, and then the TERT subunit is able to perform its function as expected. I hope that answers your question. There's a question from Akriti. Can this telomerase reactivation lead to cancer relapse in the recovered patients or cancer initiation in any other organ? Another very good question. So, and I get this question always. So there are two things. First, there have been studies and there has been research, again, from the lab of Professor Mario Blasco. If you are interested, you can have a look at it, where they really overexpressed the telomerase in general, so without any stress or anything. And then they looked at the frequency or the propensity of having a cancer or a tumor. And just by overexpressing or reactivating telomerase, you cannot cause cancer. So cancer has a lot of other molecules and signaling pathways that get, let's say, that are in dysfunction. And telomerase reactivation or lengthening of telomerase is a secondary effect. It's not the primary cause of causing a cancer. There is a high association between cancer cells and telomerase, that is true. But just by reactivating telomerase, you cannot make a cell cancerous. So, and there have been studies which have shown that just by overexpressing telomerase, you cannot cause cancer. And also in this regard, that's why we also specifically used a cardiomyocyte specific promoter so that we can avoid overexpressing telomerase in general in all the other cell types. I hope that answers your question. And the next question from Tanuja. Recent publications has shown that the role of mitochondria is huge in the propagation of neurodegenerative diseases. So can this method be useful in that as well? Yes, this can be used there as well. I mean, there are already labs that are working on telomerase and neurodegeneration also. So if you're interested, you can of course look up some papers in this aspect. But what we show here is the effect of or the role of telomerase in mitochondria, and neuronal cells also have a high demand of ATP, and they also are mitochondria rich cell types. So I'm sure there also we should be able to see protective effects of telomerase therapy. There's a next question by Shreyashi. Telomerase activity in animal cell line culture, what is its role? So I am not sure if you mean primary cell culture or in general. So for example, if you look at in our lab, for example, we isolate rat cardiomyocytes, so primary neonatal rat cardiomyocytes, and they are able to proliferate for a certain while, but then they stop. And I have checked the expression of telomerase during the different days of cell culture, and then it reduces also. So in the beginning, if it's a primary cell culture, especially neonate, maybe it has certain level of telomerase activity, which allows the cells to proliferate, but then eventually they would stop proliferating once the telomerase is shut down. And if it also depends on the cell type. So for cardiomyocytes, as I mentioned, they get terminally differentiated and they do not divide anymore. So in general, a primary cell line after a certain number of passages should stop to proliferate. However, for example, you have HEK cells or HeLa cells or tumor cell lines. They are able to proliferate extensively because they have high levels of telomerase expression. So these are two different like cell types, let's say. And depending on the telomerase activity that they possess, they would be able to proliferate and replicate for different times. There's another question from Akriti. Doxorubicin have an effect on mitochondria of other organs of the body, or only the effect on cardiomyocytes is more significant? Okay, that's also a good question. Doxorubicin has in general effect on all mitochondria, But this is more problematic in terms of cardiomyocytes because, as I discussed before, the cardiomyocytes have about 30 to 40% of the cell is mitochondria. So if a cell has more mitochondria and more mitochondria are getting damaged or destroyed, the effect or the result of it will be more critical. And that's why we see it has a much stronger effect on the cardiomyocytes in terms of this effect, the mitochondrial side effect. Is there no loss in the telomerase in oncocells? Yeah, this question is from Jasir. Thank you for the question. In this, I would answer two things. So in general, yes, most of the cancerous cells have reactivated or high levels of telomerase expression. However, there are some cancer cell types that have another mechanism to extend the telomere length, which is known as alternative lengthening of telomeres. So this is called as ALT mechanism. And in this mechanism, then they don't have telomerase expression as such, but they're still able to maintain telomere lengths and elongate them. So oncologically speaking, most of the cancer cells have telomerase expression, but some of them also have this ALT mechanism. So if you are interested, then you can read up about it. So there's another question from Somen. Can this telomerase therapy prevent other types of cancer in our body? Okay, thank you for the question. This therapy is not to prevent cancer. This therapy is to prevent the cardiotoxic effects that are coming because of cancer therapy. So the idea was that the patients from cancer who go to the clinics and who are treated of cancer with chemotherapy or radiation, in our case, we specifically looked at chemotherapy, which is doxorubicin. And these patients then further on in their lives, after 5 years or 6 years or even after 10 years, they start to develop cardiovascular complications. And the idea here is to use the telomerase therapy to prevent this kind of cardiotoxic effect of the chemotherapy that the patients will receive. So it is not to treat the cancer, it is to prevent cardiovascular complications that can happen due to cancer treatment. I hope that answers your question. Akriti has another question. No, this I answered. Ma'am, Ankit has a question. Ma'am, can you explain the molecular mechanism of telomerase in mitochondrial cell? I'm not sure if I get your question correctly. So the mechanism of telomerase in mitochondria, so far, what we have been able to show and what other researchers have also showed is that it goes into the mitochondria, and we have shown that yes, it is able to protect the mitochondria from undergoing fission. It is able to reduce the levels of reactive oxygen species, and it is also thereby able to help the mitochondria to function and to produce ATP at a normal or at a better level. Now there are several hypotheses of what else the telomere can be doing in the mitochondria, but so far at this moment I don't have a clear answer to tell you like exactly what it does. But yeah, there could be many different ways of, maybe it is protecting the mitochondrial DNA from undergoing damage, or maybe it is interacting with other proteins to stabilize the mitochondrial, because mitochondria also has its own DNA. So if you guys know this, then the mitochondria has a lot of DNA and it makes a lot of proteins on its own. So maybe it is doing something there. At this moment, I only have hypothesis, but I cannot give you a clear answer. Maybe hopefully in a few years. The next question is from Krishna. How does telomerase affect telomere synthesis in chromosomes? So the telomerase is a RNA-dependent DNA polymerase, and its main job or its conventional job is to make telomeres. So when the cell is dividing, when the cell is in the S phase and the DNA is being replicated, at this step, the telomerase enzyme will go and bind to this 3' end. So I go back to the slide. Too many slides. Okay. So if you remember that we have always this problem of the 3' overhang. So the telomerase now would basically go and bind here, and then with the help of its RNA component, the RNA template, it will then start to add hexameric telomere repeats at these ends. So thereby, when the cell eventually has to divide, it has a lot of telomeric ends. And even if the cell is losing the telomeric ends, it is not a problem for the organism or for the cell. So that's why the telomerase enzyme in general is really super active at the embryonal stages, at the early developmental stages, and then to each chromosome, it will add several of these TTAGG, TTAGG. And therefore, in the lifespan of the organism, even if it's losing a bit, and it will lose a bit of telomeric ends, it does not affect the main genes, does not affect, or let's say it does not affect so significantly the main genes that are within the chromosome. I hope this answers your question. Akriti has another question. Can this telomerase reactivation? So I already answered. Aditi has a question. How sequencing is done using telomerase to telomerase consortium? As we have listened about whole genome sequencing of human body using this telomerase method. I'm not sure if I understood your question, Aditi. Can you please maybe explain what you mean? I'm not aware of what you mean here. I will just go to the next question so far. Shreyashi has a question. Is more replication means more telomere loss? So can regulating the replication rate have a control over telomere loss and aging? So yes, this is a good question. More replication will not mean more telomere loss as long as you have an active telomerase. So for example, in stem cells and in germ cells, they have high levels of telomerase activity. So even if they proliferate a lot, they will be able to maintain their telomere lengths. The problem only happens when you do not have telomerase activity. So let's say after birth, when the telomerase activity is shut down. And that's why with every round of cell cycle division, you will lose some amount of telomere length. Now, the next question that you have is the next point to keep in mind is that the rate of telomere loss. Let's say one cell is dividing and it's losing 1 kilobase of telomere length, and the other cell is dividing and is losing only 500 base pairs of telomere length. So even though they divide the same number of times, the final shortening of telomere length would be different. So we have to keep these two things in mind. So one is if the cell has telomerase activity or not, and if it doesn't have telomerase activity, how much is the frequency or how much of the telomere is being lost in every round of cell cycle division. This will basically determine what is the extent of telomere loss at the end and how much will be the aging. So yeah, so even if you try to regulate the replication rate, it will not necessarily have an impact because it depends on what is the frequency of telomerase loss. So Shalini has a question, why doxorubicin specifically? So we used doxorubicin because we wanted to really study what is happening at the mitochondrial level. And doxorubicin is a very is a drug that is very well known to induce mitochondrial reactive oxygen species, and it is known to have cardiotoxic side effects. So that's why this was the most the best system for us to really look into the role of telomerase in mitochondria and in the context of cardiomyocyte protection, let's say. Limitation of doxorubicin. So this is a question from Misa Raza. Thank you for the question. So in general, the limitation for doxorubicin in terms of cancer treatment, as I mentioned, is that it has severe cardiotoxic effects. Not just cardiotoxic, it has also been shown to have effects or detrimental effects for other organs. Some of the patients, for example, especially childhood cancer survivors. So childhood patients who had suffered from cancer in their childhood and they had undergone chemotherapy, as they grow up, they have a lot of cognitive impairments. So they have a lot of neurological disorders. So it's not just the cardiomyocytes that are affected. There are also other organs and other cell types that are affected with the treatment of doxorubicin. And we have to keep this in mind that the effect or the toxicity of doxorubicin depends on the dose of the doxorubicin that is given. So if you remember, I had this. So if you remember here, so you see there are different doses of doxorubicin that are given to a patient depending on their cancer cell type, depending on the invasiveness of the cancer, depending on how long the treatment had occurred. So if you are really at a smaller dosage level, it may not be so toxic or detrimental for the person. But as you go higher up in the cumulative dose of doxorubicin that is given to the patient, then it is something that you really need to be careful of. So for example, let's say, God forbid, there is a child who had suffered from cancer at a young age, and maybe there is a relapse of cancer again, or even for an adult. Then you have to keep in mind that the cumulative dose of doxorubicin for this person will be already like 200 what the person had got before, plus now whatever you will give again. So in these kind of cases, it is really important to have a proper look at the echocardiography, at the heart function of the patient, and then decide if at all this is a good option for them or not. I hope that answers your question. Krishna has a question: is TERT gene connected to carcinogenesis? Example, cervical cancer. Yes, the TERT gene is associated to be overexpressed or overactivated in several types of cancer, but it is not the cause of cancer. So it is not like if you only overexpress telomerase, it will not change the frequency or the propensity of getting a cancer. But yes, in most of the cancers, the telomerase is overexpressed. A lot of people have Anjali has a question: what is the future scope in research in this regard? Yeah, I mean, in terms of telomerase therapy, there are a lot of so in general, in terms of cardiovascular therapy, there is a strong need, because cardiovascular cells, as I said, the heart cells does not divide anymore. So once it dies, it's gone. So there is a strong need of finding better therapeutic options for cardiovascular system in general. And if your question is specifically in terms of telomerase therapy, there are several labs which are working on different aspects of telomerase therapy and how it can be used as gene therapy or mod RNA therapy. And there is a lot of work that is being done in different fields in this regard. So if you're interested, of course, therapeutics is something that will always have an importance, and it will always be needed to be improved and to get better. So I would say that there is a lot of scope. I am not sure exactly what you want to do, so I would just give a general answer here. So Krishna has a question: can I perform telomere length determination of human whole blood stored for 6 months to 1 year? Yes, in general, you can do that. I mean, I have not shown here. We also have another method to measure telomere lengths based on the qPCR technique. And this you can do it if you have the blood, you can isolate the DNA from the blood and then go ahead with the telomere measurements. There is a paper from Cawthon, so Richard Cawthon from 2002. If you are interested, you can have a look at that. So it's a qPCR based telomere length detection method. Can we use the mechanism? Jasir has a question: can we use the alt mechanism in animal cell line? In general, I would say yes, but I personally have not read any paper, so I'm sorry, I cannot tell you about a paper or a cell line that does it, but in theory, it should be possible. But I have not researched on this topic, so I cannot really say more about it. If there are any other questions, I guess. Okay, there is another question. What are the sequences you have tried for the cardiovascular diseases? How did you screen out those? So in this case, we did not have to screen anything, Upendra, because as I mentioned that the telomerase gene therapy has already been done before. So this is not something that we did for the first time. So we knew the exact sequence of the telomerase cDNA that we had to take. So in our case, we did not have to screen for any sequences. I guess I cannot find any more questions now. Yeah, Anas has a question. My question concerns about the stem cell exhaustion within the somatic population. Is there any indication why there is intermittent telomerase activity in adult stem cells leading to loss of telomere length in adult stem cells? So if I understood your question correctly, you are asking about why sometimes the telomerase activity is lost for a certain time. And I guess, to be honest, I have not read enough about this aspect. So what I would say is that even if there is telomerase activity in a cell, it will not be able to add as many telomeric repeats that it would have done, let's say, in the embryonal stage. So the telomerase activity is able to maintain the telomere length, but not at the same level that it did when it was an embryonal stem cell. That would be my answer, but I have to read up more about it and then let you know. Is it also helpful in cosmetic industry? So thank you for the question, Sarah. Yes, there are a lot of anti-aging therapies that are in the context of telomerase and to reactivate telomerase. So, I mean, I personally don't know of any cosmetic industry that's working on it, but in general, anti-aging is, so the telomerase therapy in the context of anti-aging is a very booming field and a lot of labs are working on it. I think that's it.
Yes, I hope all the questions are done. So I'll be sharing the feedback link shortly. Last but not the least, I would request Argyadeep Das sir to kindly propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
Thank you. So, a very good evening to one and all, and all my heartfelt thanks to our eminent guest speaker, Dr. Sambhavi Chatterjee. And I thank you for accepting my invitation for the interactive talk come webinar. So, it was an interactive and research oriented talk from a great woman scientist. So, the topic of your research is so useful in this time because the cardiovascular disorder and cancer are the huge problem across the globe, and your topic of research is so relevant inside knowledge and awareness to keep control of this type of disorders. And the way you shared your knowledge regarding the topic was so impressive and attractive, encouraging for all the body students and researchers, because literally I was enjoying it, and I hope all are liking too. So thank you for spare your precious time and share your research work with us, and big thank you for answering all the questions and interact with the students and researchers community. It was really a great experience. So it's give me a immense pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks to our today speaker, Dr. Sambhavi Chatterjee, and also all the participants. Once again, I thank you, ma'am, for such a interesting research oriented talk. Your dedication and your work in the field, not only science and also a betterment of scientific society, is really commendable and attractive, right? So hats off to you, ma'am. And as a woman scientist, and a long journey of your research is so impressive, and I'm looking forward for your guidance in future too. Thank you. And now, and my heartfelt thanks to our organizer, event coordinator, Dr. Kavita Pal, ma'am, Sudeep sir, Ritu ma'am, and Somuju ma'am, and our organizers, Ms. Sneha Mahajan, Ms. Ananya Chakrabarti, Ms. Shreyans, Ms. Devasri Roy, and my dear students and researchers. Thank you for joining and invest your precious time for listening the talk and support us. And last but not the least, on the behalf of Biosetup Life Science, I thank you each and every one for contribution to make this webinar a successful one. I'm looking forward for arranging many such events to let people know about the process made in science. So thank you all and have a good day ahead. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi.